A barefoot boy stood in the luxurious penthouse, staring at the impossible safe. The billionaire smirked. "I'll give you $100 million if you open it." His executives burst into laughter, but when the child's small hands touched the cold metal, their mockery froze forever. The morning sun cast golden shadows across the glass towers of Chicago's financial district. But 10-year-old Daniel Hayes saw none of that beauty. His bare feet moved carefully across the scorching summer pavement, each step a calculated dance to avoid the hottest patches of concrete. His worn backpack, held together with safety pins and hope, bounced against his thin shoulders as he approached the building that had haunted his dreams for the past 3 nights. The Thornton Tower. 68 floors of steel, glass, and money. So much money that Daniel couldn't even imagine the numbers. He'd learned about millions in school, back when he still attended regularly. But billions? Trillions? Those were just words that meant more than you'll ever have. Daniel stopped across the street, staring up at the building that seemed to pierce the sky itself. Somewhere up there, on the top floor, was Victor Thornton. The man whose face was on billboards, whose name was whispered with either reverence or fear, whose fortune was so vast that economists used it as a benchmark for measuring wealth inequality. And Daniel was about to walk into his office and make him an offer. The thought was insane. Daniel knew it was insane, but desperation had a way of making insane ideas seem reasonable. His little sister, Maya, was in the hospital 3 blocks away. The doctors said she needed surgery, expensive surgery that their insurance wouldn't cover, and that would cost more money than Daniel's mother could make in 5 years of working double shifts at the diner. 72 hours, the doctor had said, looking at Daniel's mother with sympathetic eyes that somehow made everything worse. After that, we can't guarantee. He hadn't finished the sentence. He hadn't needed to. Daniel touched his pocket, feeling the small metal object inside. His grandfather's gift, given to him the night before the old man died. "This is special, Danny," his grandfather had whispered, his voice weak but urgent. "When you need it most, you'll understand. Trust your hands. Trust what I taught you." His grandfather had been a locksmith. Not a famous one, not a rich one, but skilled. He'd taught Daniel things during those long afternoons in his workshop. Things about locks, tumblers, mechanisms, and the art of listening to what metal was trying to tell you. Daniel had thought they were just games, ways for an old man to entertain a curious grandson. Now standing outside the Thornton Tower with his sister dying and no other options, Daniel wondered if those lessons had been preparing him for this exact moment. He took a deep breath and crossed the street. The lobby was everything he'd expected and worse. Marble floors so polished he could see his reflection. Dirty, scared, obviously poor. Crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than his entire apartment building. Security guards in sharp uniforms who looked at him the way you'd look at a rat that had wandered in from the alley. "Hey, kid," one of them called out, already moving toward him. "This isn't a public building. You need to leave." "I need to see Mr. Thornton," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. The security guard, his name tag read Morrison, actually laughed. "Right, and I need to see the president. Get out of here before I call the police." "Please," Daniel said, hating how small his voice sounded. "It's important. It's about the safe." Morrison's expression shifted from amusement to confusion. "What safe?" "The one on the 68th floor. The one that's been locked for 3 years. The one that nobody can open." The lobby went quiet. Other security guards had stopped what they were doing. A woman in an expensive business outfit paused mid-step. Even the receptionist looked up from her computer. Morrison's hand moved toward his radio. "How do you know about that?" "Everyone knows about it," Daniel said, which was true. The story had been in the newspapers, on television, even on social media. Victor Thornton's father had died 3 years ago, leaving behind a titanium safe that no one could open. The old man had been paranoid, had used a custom lock that he'd designed himself, and had taken the combination to his grave. Inside the safe, according to Thornton Sr.'s will, was something valuable, though no one knew exactly what. Victor Thornton had hired every expert locksmith in the country. None could open it. He'd offered $1 million reward. No one had claimed it. The safe had become legendary, a puzzle that seemed impossible to solve, a symbol of secrets that would never be revealed. "I can open it," Daniel said. Morrison stared at him for a long moment, then spoke into his radio. "Yeah, we've got a situation in the lobby. Some kid claiming he can open the safe. Should I just throw him out or—" The radio crackled. A woman's voice responded, tinged with curiosity. "Mr. Thornton says bring him up." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "Seriously?" "Seriously. Mr. Thornton says he could use the entertainment." Entertainment. The word stung, but Daniel had expected nothing less. Rich people didn't take poor kids seriously. They certainly didn't believe a 10-year-old could solve a puzzle that had stumped professional locksmiths with decades of experience. But Daniel had something those professionals didn't. He had his grandfather's training, his grandfather's tools, and his grandfather's gift for understanding locks in a way that went beyond technical knowledge. The elevator ride to the 68th floor was the longest 90 seconds of Daniel's life. Morrison stood beside him, silent but watchful, probably expecting Daniel to bolt or confess. This was all a joke. Daniel kept his hand in his pocket, touching the small metal tools his grandfather had left him, drawing comfort from their familiar shape. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that made the lobby look modest by comparison. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city. Artwork that Daniel recognized from his art history textbook. Actual original paintings worth millions decorated the walls. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. A woman in a professional outfit greeted them with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Thornton will see you now. He's in the main conference room with his executive team. They're quite eager to meet you." The way she said eager made Daniel's stomach twist. They weren't eager to see if he could open the safe. They were eager to watch him fail, to laugh at the poor kid who thought he could do something impressive. Daniel followed her through double doors into a conference room that could have held 50 people. Currently it held 7. 6 men in expensive suits stood around a massive table, and at the head of that table, lounging in a leather chair like a king on his throne, was Victor Thornton himself. He was 43 years old but looked younger, with the kind of ageless appearance that came from personal trainers, private chefs, and cosmetic procedures that cost more than cars. His hair was perfectly styled, his suit probably cost more than Daniel's mother made in a month, and his smile was sharp enough to cut. Well, Victor said, his voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. "Morrison tells me we have a young entrepreneur here, someone who thinks he can succeed where the best locksmiths in the country have failed." The executives around the table chuckled. One of them, a man with silver hair and cold eyes, actually snapped a photo of Daniel on his phone. "What's your name, kid?" Victor asked. "Daniel. Daniel Hayes." "Daniel Hayes," Victor repeated, as if testing how the name sounded. "And how old are you, Daniel?" 10. More laughter. Victor's smile grew wider. 10 years old. Fascinating. Tell me, Daniel, what makes you think you can open a safe that has defeated experts with 30-40 years of experience? Daniel wanted to explain about his grandfather, about the lessons, about the special understanding of locks that had been passed down. But looking at Victor's mocking expression and the amused faces of his executives, Daniel knew that explanations would only invite more ridicule. "I just can," Daniel said simply. "He just can," Victor repeated, looking at his executives with exaggerated amazement. "Gentlemen, we have a prodigy in our midst. A 10-year-old with dirty feet," and he leaned forward, studying Daniel more closely. "Is that a safety pin holding your backpack together?" "Yes, sir." "Incredible," Victor said, though his tone suggested he found nothing admirable about it. "You know what, Daniel Hayes? I'm in a generous mood today. I'm going to make you an offer." He stood up, walking around the table with the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. When he reached the far wall, he pressed a button, and a section of the wood paneling slid aside to reveal what Daniel had come to see. The safe. It was smaller than Daniel had expected, maybe 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide, but it radiated an aura of impossibility. The titanium surface was unmarked, unblemished, perfect. The dial mechanism was unlike anything Daniel had seen in his grandfather's workshop or in the books he'd studied. It was custom-made, unique, designed by a paranoid old man who'd wanted to ensure his secrets stayed secret. "Here's my offer," Victor said, his voice taking on a theatrical quality as he addressed both Daniel and his executives. "If you can open this safe, I will give you $100 million. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. Daniel's mind couldn't even process it. $100 million. Maya's surgery would cost $300,000. That would leave $99,700,000. Enough to pay off their apartment, to get his mother out of the diner, to ensure Maya would have everything she needed for the rest of her life. However, Victor continued, his smile sharpening. When you fail, and you will fail, you have to do something for me. What? Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You have to stand right here in front of all these gentlemen and admit that you're just a poor kid with delusions of grandeur, that you wasted everyone's time with your ridiculous claim, that people like you should know your place and not bother people like us with your fantasies. The cruelty of the offer was stunning. Victor wasn't just offering money, he was offering humiliation. He wanted to crush this poor kid's spirit, to teach him a lesson about staying in his lane, about not reaching above his station. The executives were watching Daniel with predatory interest now, like sharks circling wounded prey. They wanted to see him accept, wanted to watch him fail, wanted to witness the moment when hope died in his eyes. Daniel thought about Maya in the hospital bed, her small hand holding their mother's, her voice asking if she was going to die. He thought about his mother crying in the bathroom when she thought no one could hear, about the eviction notice on their apartment door, about the way poverty had slowly strangled every dream their family had ever had. He thought about his grandfather's words. Trust your hands, Danny. Trust what I taught you. Okay, Daniel said. I accept. Victor's grin was triumphant. Excellent. Gentlemen, gather around. This is going to be entertaining. The executives formed a semicircle around the safe, phones out, ready to record the moment. Victor stepped back, gesturing to the safe like a game show host revealing a prize. It's all yours, Daniel Hayes. Show us what you've got. Daniel approached the safe on legs that trembled but held. His bare feet were silent on the expensive carpet. His hands, small, dirty, calloused from work no 10-year-old should have to do, reached out toward the cold titanium surface. The moment his fingers touched the dial, something happened. Daniel couldn't explain it, couldn't put it into words that made sense. But he felt something, a connection, a whisper of understanding, like the safe was speaking to him in a language only he could hear. His grandfather had tried to explain this feeling once, had called it listening with your fingertips, but Daniel had never fully understood until now. He closed his eyes, blocking out Victor's mocking smile and the executive's cameras. He blocked out Maya in the hospital, and his mother's tears, and the crushing weight of poverty that had defined his entire life. There was only Daniel and the safe, and the conversation happening between his fingers and the metal beneath them. His right hand moved to the dial, not quickly, not with the confidence of someone who knew the combination. Slowly, carefully, feeling for something he couldn't name but would recognize when he found it. The room had gone quiet. Even Victor had stopped smirking, watching with curiosity as Daniel's fingers moved with strange certainty across the dial. Daniel turned the dial right, stopped, turned it left, stopped, right again, but only slightly, left, right, left. This is ridiculous, one of the executives muttered. The kid's just guessing. Shh, Victor said, and there was something new in his voice. Not mockery anymore, but something else. Something that might have been uncertainty. Daniel's fingers continued their dance. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind. Every lock has a heartbeat, Danny. You just have to learn to feel it. Daniel felt it now. The heartbeat of the safe, the rhythm of the mechanism, the pattern that only existed in the spaces between the sounds and the silences. He turned the dial one final time and heard a click. The sound was small, almost inaudible, but in the absolute silence of the conference room, it sounded like thunder. Daniel's eyes opened. His hands were shaking. He looked at Victor Thornton, whose expression had frozen in a way that would have been comical if the moment weren't so serious. I think, Daniel's voice cracked. I think it's unlocked. That's impossible, Victor whispered. But even as he said it, Daniel reached for the safe's handle. It moved smoothly, easily, like it had been waiting 3 years for exactly this moment. The safe door swung open, and inside, illuminated by the afternoon sun streaming through the conference room windows, was something that made every person in the room gasp. The safe wasn't filled with money or gold or bearer bonds. or any of the valuable things everyone had imagined. It was filled with letters, hundreds of letters in neat stacks, each envelope addressed in shaky handwriting. Victor Thornton stepped forward, his face pale, his hands trembling as he reached for the top envelope. He turned it over, and Daniel could see the writing on the front. To my son, Victor, to be opened on the day someone proves that impossible things can still happen. The billionaire's mask cracked. His hands shook as he opened the envelope and began to read. And as he read, tears started falling down his face. Real tears, the kind that couldn't be faked or controlled. The room stayed silent as Victor read. When he finished, he looked at Daniel with an expression completely different from the mocking superiority of 10 minutes ago. "How did you do it?" Victor asked, his voice rough with emotion. "How did a 10-year-old kid open a safe that defeated every expert in the country?" Daniel thought about explaining, about his grandfather, and the lessons and the special gift for understanding locks. But then he realized that the answer was simpler and more profound than any of that. "Because I had to," Daniel said. "Because my sister is dying, and I needed to do something impossible to save her." The words fell into the room like stones into still water, and the ripples they created would change everything. The silence in the conference room stretched like a rubber band pulled to its breaking point. Victor Thornton stood frozen, the letter from his father still trembling in his hands, tears cutting clean tracks down his carefully composed face. Around him, his executives shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to process seeing their invincible CEO reduced to raw emotion by words written years ago. Daniel remained by the safe, his small frame dwarfed by the massive furniture and towering windows, his bare feet pressed against the plush carpet, grounding him in a moment that felt increasingly surreal. He'd done it. He'd actually opened the safe. $100 million. Maya's surgery. Their mother's freedom from endless work. A future that didn't taste like fear and desperation. But looking at Victor's face, at the vulnerability bleeding through his billion-dollar armor, Daniel felt something unexpected stirring in his chest. Not triumph, not even relief, something closer to recognition. Like seeing his own pain reflected in someone he'd assumed was incapable of feeling it. "Your sister is dying?" Victor finally spoke, his voice stripped of its earlier mockery. He carefully placed the letter on the conference table, his hands moving with the delicate care of someone handling something infinitely precious. "What's wrong with her?" "Heart condition," Daniel said quietly. "She needs surgery. The doctors say she has days, maybe a week. My mum works at Miller's Diner double shifts, but the insurance won't cover it. The hospital wants $300,000 before they'll schedule the operation." One of the executives, the one with silver hair who'd taken Daniel's photo earlier, made a dismissive sound. $300,000? That's nothing. You could have just asked for help instead of pulling this stunt. "Enough, Gerald." Victor cut him off sharply, still staring at Daniel with an expression the boy couldn't quite read. "When you say days, how many days exactly?" "The doctor said 72 hours. That was yesterday morning." Victor pulled out his phone with sudden urgency, his fingers moving rapidly across the screen. "Janet, get Dr. Reeves on the line. Yes, I know he's in surgery. I don't care. Pull him out. This is priority alpha." He paused, listening. "St. Catherine's Children's Hospital. Patient named Maya Hayes. I want a full team assembled within the hour. Money is not an object. Yes, I'll hold." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "What are you doing?" "Saving your sister's life," Victor said simply, then returned his attention to the phone. "Marcus?" "Yes, it's Thornton. I need you to authorize an emergency medical procedure. St. Catherine's. 8-year-old patient, cardiac surgery. Bill it to my personal account, and add a 0 to whatever they quote you. I want their absolute best." Another pause. "I don't care if it's unconventional. Make it happen." The executives exchanged glances, a silent conversation happening in raised eyebrows and subtle gestures. Daniel recognized that look. He'd seen it enough times when adults talked about his family. They thought Victor was being impulsive, emotional, making decisions with his heart instead of his head. They thought he'd regret this later. But Daniel saw something else in Victor's eyes, something raw and wounded that had been opened by those letters in the safe. Victor ended the call and looked at Daniel directly. "Dr. Reeves is the best pediatric cardiac surgeon in the state. He'll be at St. Catherine's within the hour. Your sister will have her surgery today. I can't. We can't afford. Daniel stammered, his mind struggling to process the speed at which his world was changing. You opened the safe, Victor said flatly. $100 million. That was the deal. He gestured to Gerald, who looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Gerald, prepare the paperwork. I want the funds transferred to a trust for Daniel and his sister by end of business today. Victor, surely you're not serious about… Gerald began. Did I stutter? Victor's voice carried the sharp edge that Daniel had heard when he first entered the room, but now it was directed at his own executive. The boy did what he said he'd do. I made an offer. I keep my word. If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to find employment elsewhere. Gerald's mouth snapped shut, though his eyes promised this conversation wasn't over. Victor turned back to Daniel, and his expression softened in a way that seemed to surprise even him. The letters in that safe, they're from my father. He wrote one for every week of the last 5 years of his life. Letters he never gave me while he was alive because his voice caught. We weren't speaking. I thought he was a sentimental old fool, wasting his time on outdated values and ridiculous principles. I was too busy building empires to listen to his stories. He reached into the safe, pulling out another envelope at random. He wrote in this one about the day I was born, how he held me and promised to always protect me, to teach me what really mattered. Victor's laugh was bitter, self-mocking. I never let him teach me anything. I thought I was smarter than him. Thought his generation didn't understand how the modern world worked. What did the first letter say? Daniel asked quietly. Victor picked it up again, his hand steadier now. It says that he designed the safe with an impossible lock, because he wanted to make sure only someone truly special could open it. Someone who had the gift that runs in our family. The ability to understand mechanisms not with books and tools, but with intuition and patience. He thought maybe I'd inherited it, that I'd be the one to open it, but I never tried. I hired experts instead, threw money at the problem like I throw money at everything. He looked at Daniel with something that might have been envy. You're 10 years old. You have nothing. But you have something I've spent 43 years trying to buy. The ability to do something impossible because you absolutely have to. Not because it's profitable or impressive, but because someone you love is depending on you. The conference room had become uncomfortably intimate, the executives clearly wishing they were anywhere else. But Victor seemed to have forgotten they existed. My father's last words to me were, I'm proud of the boy you were, and I'm sad about the man you've become. Victor continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I had him thrown out of this building that day. My own father. Security escorted him out because I was in an important meeting and couldn't be bothered with his emotional manipulation. He died 2 weeks later. Daniel felt tears burning his own eyes now. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry for me, Victor said harshly. I don't deserve sympathy. I deserve exactly what I got. 3 years staring at an unopened safe, wondering what secrets he'd taken to his grave. I convinced myself it was probably nothing important, just the sentimental ramblings of a dying old man. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't stop wondering. He gestured to the stacks of letters still in the safe. There must be over 200 letters in here. 200 weeks of thoughts and memories and wisdom that I'll never have time to reclaim. All because I was too arrogant to listen when he was alive. Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket, a cheap, prepaid model that barely worked. He pulled it out to see a text from his mother. Where are you? Hospital keeps asking about surgery scheduling. Baby, they're going to discharge her if we can't pay soon. I need to go, Daniel said urgently. My mom doesn't know where I am. She's going to be so worried. Morrison will drive you, Victor said immediately, then called out toward the door. Actually, cancel that. I'll take him myself. The executive's reactions were almost comical, jaws dropping, eyes widening in synchronized shock. Gerald found his voice first. Victor, you have the board meeting in 20 minutes. The merger depends on… Reschedule it, Victor said, already moving toward the door. Come on, Daniel, let's go save your sister. The ride to St. Catherine's Children's Hospital was surreal. Daniel sat in the back of Victor's private car, a vehicle so luxurious it felt like a spaceship compared to the city buses and his own 2 feet that usually got him around. The leather seats were softer than his bed at home. The air conditioning worked perfectly. Classical music played softly from speakers Daniel couldn't even see. Victor sat beside him, reading through the letters from his father with an expression that cycled between grief, anger, regret, and something that might have been hope. "My father was a locksmith," Victor said suddenly, not looking up from the letter in his hands. "Did you know that? Before he started the company, before any of this existed, he had a small shop on the south side. He'd spend hours working on a single lock, talking to it like it was alive. I used to think it was embarrassing. Now I wonder what else I missed by being too proud to pay attention. My grandfather was a locksmith too," Daniel said. "He taught me everything. Said locks have personalities, that each one is unique. He said the best locksmiths don't force locks open. They convince them." Victor looked at Daniel with genuine interest. "Is that how you opened the safe? You convinced it?" "I guess so," Daniel said. "I just listened, felt what it wanted. My grandfather said I had a gift for it, but I thought he was just being nice because I was his grandson. Gifts are strange things," Victor mused. "My father tried to teach me his gift, and I refused to learn." "Your grandfather taught you his gift, and you treasured it. And now, years later, your gift has changed both our lives in ways neither of us could have predicted." They pulled up to the hospital just as Daniel's mother was exiting through the front doors, her face streaked with tears, her diner uniform rumpled from a shift she'd probably worked straight through. When she saw Daniel getting out of the luxury car, her expression shifted from desperation to confusion to fear. "Daniel, where have you been? I've been calling and calling." She stopped abruptly as Victor stepped out of the car behind him, his expensive suit and commanding presence making her take an involuntary step back. "Who is this? Daniel, what did you do?" "Mrs. Hayes," Victor said, extending his hand with a gentleness that surprised Daniel. "My name is Victor Thornton. Your son just did something extraordinary, and I'm here to make sure your daughter gets the surgery she needs." Daniel's mother looked between Victor and Daniel, trying to process words that didn't make sense. "I don't understand. We can't afford—" "You don't need to afford anything," Victor said. "Dr. Reeves is already inside, assembling a surgical team. The procedure will begin within the hour. All expenses are covered." "But why? How?" "I don't—" Her legs seemed to give out, and Victor caught her arm, steadying her. "Because your son has a gift that saved something precious to me," Victor said simply. "And because I've spent too many years not helping people when I had the power to do so. That changes today." Daniel's mother looked at her son, questions and confusion and desperate hope all tangled in her expression. Daniel just nodded, too overwhelmed with emotion to speak. "Let's go see Maya," Daniel finally managed to say. "Let's tell her everything's going to be okay." The pediatric intensive care unit smelled like antiseptic and hope mixed with fear. Daniel had spent enough time in this hospital over the past months to recognize every sound: the steady beep of monitors, the soft squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum, the hushed conversations that happened outside patient rooms when news was either very good or very bad. Maya's room was at the end of the hall, number 304. Daniel knew the way by heart, could walk it with his eyes closed. But today he wasn't walking alone. His mother held his hand on one side, gripping so tightly it almost hurt, while Victor Thornton walked on his other side, carrying the weight of his own revelations like a physical burden. Through the small window in Maya's door, Daniel could see her tiny form in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed, keeping track of a heart that was working too hard and failing despite its best efforts. She was awake, staring at the ceiling with the practiced patience of a child who'd spent too many days in hospital beds. "Baby," Daniel's mother whispered, pushing open the door. "We have good news." Maya turned her head slowly, her face lighting up when she saw her brother. "Danny, you came back." Her voice was weak, breathless, each word requiring effort that broke Daniel's heart. "I thought maybe you got lost." "Never," Daniel said, moving to her bedside and taking her small hand in his. Her fingers were cold despite the warm room, her skin almost translucent. "I told you I'd fix everything, didn't I?" "You said you'd try," Maya corrected with a small smile. "Mama says trying is different from fixing." "Well, this time I actually fixed it," Daniel said, fighting back tears. "Maya, this is Mr. Thornton. He's going to help make you better." Maya's eyes moved to Victor. studying him with the directness that only sick children possess. Those who've learned that adults often lie about important things, that promises of everything will be fine don't always come true. Are you a doctor? She asked. No, Victor said, his voice surprisingly gentle as he approached the bed. But I know the best doctor in the state, and he's coming to make you well. Your brother did something amazing today, Maya. He saved your life. Danny's good at saving things, Maya said, her breathing labored between words. He saved a bird once, fixed its wing with popsicle sticks. The innocent statement hit Victor visibly. Here was a boy who'd spent his childhood saving injured birds with popsicle sticks, learning to fix broken things with whatever materials he could find, while Victor's own childhood had been spent in private schools and country clubs, learning to see everything as a transaction, a deal to be made. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. A man in surgical scrubs entered, exuding the quiet confidence of someone who'd performed impossible procedures so many times they'd become routine. He was in his 50s, with kind eyes and steady hands. I'm Dr. Reeves, he said, addressing Maya first before turning to the adults. And you must be Maya Hayes. I've been reviewing your charts, and I have to say, you're one tough kid. I don't feel tough, Maya admitted. The toughest people rarely do, Dr. Reeves said with a smile. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Thornton, could I speak with you outside for a moment? Maya, I'll be right back, and then we're going to have a conversation about how we're going to fix that hard-working heart of yours. In the hallway, Dr. Reeves's expression became more serious. Daniel followed despite his mother's attempt to make him stay in the room, and no one sent him back. He'd earned the right to hear this, to know what came next. The surgery is high risk, Dr. Reeves said without preamble. Maya's condition has deteriorated significantly. Under normal circumstances, I'd recommend waiting to build her strength. But we don't have that luxury. The surgery needs to happen tonight. Tonight? Daniel's mother gasped. But I thought, don't you need time to prepare? My team is already preparing, Dr. Reeves said. Mr. Thornton was very clear that time is critical, and I agree. Every hour we wait increases the risk. The surgery will take approximately 8 hours. I'll be honest with you, it's going to be complicated. But Maya's young, and young hearts are resilient. I've seen children bounce back from situations that would defeat an adult. What are her chances? Daniel's mother could barely get the words out. Dr. Reeves met her eyes directly. Without surgery, she has days at most. With surgery, I'm giving her a 70% chance of full recovery. Those are good odds, Mrs. Hayes. Much better than what you had this morning. 70%. Daniel's mind latched onto the number. It meant 30% chance of failure. 30% chance that opening the safe, meeting Victor, doing the impossible, none of it would matter. 30% chance that Maya would die on the operating table. But it also meant 70% chance she'd live. 70% chance she'd get to grow up, go to school, laugh and play and be a normal kid instead of a patient waiting to die. When do we need to decide? Daniel's mother asked. You just did, Dr. Reeves said gently. I saw it in your eyes. We'll begin prep immediately. Maya will be taken to surgery in 2 hours. That gives you time to be with her, to talk to her before the procedure. After Dr. Reeves left, the three of them stood in the hallway in silence. Victor was the first to speak. Mrs. Hayes, I don't know if Daniel explained, but the arrangement we made, there's a significant financial component. Beyond the surgery costs, there will be funds available for Maya's recovery, for your family's needs. Daniel's mother looked at Victor with an expression that mixed gratitude and suspicion. Why are you doing this? Nobody gives away money for nothing. What do you want from us? The bluntness of the question seemed to surprise Victor. He was probably used to people accepting his generosity without question, without looking for the catch. What I want, Victor said slowly, is to not be the man my father died thinking I was. Your son opened a safe that contained letters from my father. Letters I'll never have the chance to discuss with him. Letters that showed me I've been living my life completely wrong. Helping Maya, helping your family. It's the first step toward becoming someone my father would have been proud of. That's a lot of pressure to put on a sick little girl, Daniel's mother said, still guarded. You're right, Victor admitted. That's not fair to Maya. Let me put it differently. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I've used that money to make myself feel important, powerful, superior. Today, your 10-year-old son showed me that real power isn't about how much you have. It's about what you do with it. I'm helping Maya because it's the right thing to do. No strings, no expectations. Just one human being helping another. Daniel's mother studied Victor's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, thank you, Mr. Thornton. I don't think I'll ever be able to repay you, but thank you. Call me Victor, and you already repaid me by raising a son brave enough to walk into a billionaire's office and demand a chance to do the impossible. They returned to Maya's room, where she was being prepared for surgery by 2 nurses who moved with practiced efficiency. An IV was being placed, monitors adjusted, consent forms appearing on clipboards. Mama? Maya's voice was small, scared. I'm going to sleep soon. Yes, baby, Daniel's mother said, stroking her daughter's hair. But when you wake up, you're going to feel so much better. Your heart won't have to work so hard anymore. What if I don't wake up? Maya asked, and the question sucked all the air from the room. Daniel's mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. How do you promise a child they'll wake up when you can't guarantee it? How do you lie convincingly enough to erase their fear? Daniel moved to Maya's bedside and took her hand. Remember the bird? He asked. The one with the broken wing? Maya nodded weakly. Everyone said it would die. Mom said we should let nature take its course, but I fixed its wing with popsicle sticks and tape and hope. And you know what happened? It flew away, Maya whispered. It flew away, Daniel confirmed. Because sometimes, when something seems impossible, you just have to try anyway. Dr. Reeves is like me with that bird, except way better. He's going to fix your heart, and you're going to fly, Maya, I promise. You can't promise that, Maya said, but she was smiling slightly. Watch me, Daniel said. I promised I'd fix everything this morning, and look what happened. I opened an impossible safe. I met a billionaire. I made sure you'd get the surgery you need. I'm on a roll. The universe isn't going to stop me now. Victor watched this exchange with an expression of profound emotion. When Maya finally drifted off to sleep from the pre-surgery medication, he pulled Daniel aside. Your grandfather taught you more than locksmithing, Victor said quietly. He taught you hope. That's a rarer gift than you realize. Hope doesn't cost anything, Daniel said, echoing something his grandfather used to say. That's why poor people have so much of it. The words were simple, but they carried weight that made Victor flinch. I used to think hope was for people who couldn't afford certainty. Now I realize certainty is an illusion, and hope is the only thing that's real. A nurse approached with final paperwork. Mrs. Hayes, we're ready to take Maya to the surgical suite. You can walk with us as far as the prep area. The next 20 minutes were a blur of movement and emotion. Maya on a gurney, looking impossibly small. Daniel's mother walking beside her, holding her hand, whispering words of love and encouragement. Daniel on the other side, trying to be brave, even as tears streamed down his face. At the doors to the surgical wing, they had to stop. Maya was wheeled away, disappearing behind heavy doors that closed with a finality that felt like an ending rather than a beginning. Daniel's mother collapsed into a chair in the waiting room, her strength finally giving out. Daniel sat beside her, taking her hand, trying to be strong when all he wanted to do was fall apart. Victor stood near the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to glow as evening approached. His phone buzzed repeatedly, calls and texts from his office, from his executives, from people demanding his attention for things that suddenly seemed monumentally unimportant. He silenced the phone and sat down across from Daniel and his mother. Tell me about your family, Victor said. Not the sad parts, the good parts, the memories that make you smile. Daniel's mother looked surprised by the request, but slowly, hesitantly, she began to talk. About Maya's laugh, which sounded like music. About Daniel's determination, how he'd taught himself to read at age 4 because he was impatient with learning slowly. About family dinners with not enough food, but more than enough love. And as she talked, as Daniel added his own memories, Victor listened with the attention of someone who'd forgotten how to hear stories that didn't end with profit margins and stock prices. Somewhere above them, in an operating room that smelled of antiseptic and determination, Dr. Reeves and his team were fighting to save an 8-year-old girl's life. And in a waiting room that smelled of fear and hope and possibility, three people from completely different worlds sat together, bound by the strange circumstances that had made them family for the next 8 hours. The surgery had begun. Now all they could do was wait. The waiting room existed in its own strange dimension where time moved differently. Minutes stretched into hours, and hours compressed into moments. The clock on the wall read 9:47 p.m., which meant Maya had been in surgery for 3 hours and 13 minutes. 5 more hours to go if everything went according to plan. Daniel had memorized every detail of this room during the wait. The pale walls with motivational posters showing sunrises and mountains with words like hope and strength printed beneath them. The coffee machine in the corner that dispensed liquid that tasted like regret. The other families in various stages of their own waiting, their own prayers, their own desperate negotiations with fate. His mother had fallen into an exhausted sleep in the chair beside him, her head resting on his shoulder, her breathing finally steady after hours of silent tears. Daniel didn't dare move, didn't want to wake her. She'd been strong for so long. Strong for him, strong for Maya, strong when their father left, strong when the bills piled up, strong when the world seemed determined to break them. She deserved this small peace, even if it came in an uncomfortable hospital chair. Victor sat across from them, but he wasn't the same man who'd walked into this hospital hours ago. The carefully constructed armor of wealth and power had been slowly stripped away by the mundane intimacy of waiting. His expensive suit jacket was draped over a chair. His tie had been loosened, then removed entirely. His perfectly styled hair now showed the evidence of fingers run through it repeatedly. He looked, Daniel thought, like a regular person, like someone's father waiting for news about their child. For the past hour, Victor had been reading the letters from his father's safe. He'd brought several with him from the office, unable to leave them behind. Now he sat with one open in his hands, his lips moving silently as he read words written years ago by a man who died thinking his son didn't care. "He wrote about you in this one," Victor said suddenly, his voice quiet so as not to wake Daniel's mother. Daniel looked up, surprised. "About me? How could he write about me? He died before we ever met." "Not about you specifically," Victor clarified, holding up the letter, "but about someone like you. Listen, I hope someday you meet someone who reminds you that success isn't measured in what you accumulate, but in who you help along the way." Victor's voice had grown thick with emotion. He carefully refolded the letter and placed it back in his jacket pocket. "My father died years ago, but he knew you were coming, Daniel. Not you specifically, but someone who would show me what he couldn't. He sounds like he was a good person," Daniel said quietly. "He was the best person I've ever known," Victor admitted. "And I treated him like his values were outdated, like his kindness was weakness. I built an empire while he ran a locksmith shop, and I thought that meant I'd won." Before Daniel could respond, a man in his 30s approached them, moving with aggressive confidence. He wore an expensive suit, though something about the way he wore it suggested he was trying too hard to project success. "Victor," the man said, his tone mixing familiarity with barely concealed irritation. "I've been calling you for hours. The board meeting was a disaster without you. The merger is falling apart. Grayson Industries is threatening to pull out entirely." Victor looked up at the man with mild disinterest. "Hello, Peter. As you can see, I'm somewhat occupied at the moment." "Occupied?" Peter's voice rose slightly. "Victor, this deal is worth $3 billion. $3 billion. Your absence today cost us leverage." He stopped abruptly, finally noticing Daniel and his sleeping mother. "Who are these people?" "They're the reason I wasn't at your meeting," Victor said calmly. "Peter, this is Daniel Hayes and his mother. Daniel's sister is currently in surgery." Peter's expression suggested he couldn't comprehend why this information was relevant. "I'm sorry about the sister truly, but Victor, you can't let personal charity interfere with billion-dollar deals. You need to get back to the office. Now." The silence that followed was dangerous. Daniel could see Victor's jaw tighten, could see something cold and sharp entering his eyes. "Peter," Victor said, his voice quiet but carrying weight that made the other man step back. "Do you know what my father did before he started the company? He was a locksmith or something, right?" Peter said dismissively. "But Victor, that's not relevant to—" "He was a locksmith," Victor interrupted. The best in the city. People trusted him with their most precious belongings. And he never, not once, put profit ahead of service. He never turned away someone who couldn't pay. He never treated people as less than human because they didn't have money. That's very noble, Peter said with barely concealed sarcasm. But that kind of thinking doesn't build billion-dollar corporations. You're right, Victor agreed. That kind of thinking builds something more important. It builds character. It builds relationships. It builds a legacy that matters beyond quarterly earnings reports. He stood up, facing Peter directly. My father died believing I'd become everything he'd feared. A man who measured worth in dollars, who saw people as resources to be exploited. Victor, you're being dramatic. I'm being honest. Victor cut him off. For the first time in years, I'm being completely honest. The merger can wait. The board can manage without me. But this boy's sister is in surgery right now, and I made a promise to be here. So I'm here. Peter looked between Victor and Daniel, clearly trying to understand what had caused this transformation. Is this about the safe? What was inside that's making you act like this? Letters, Victor said simply. Letters from my father explaining what really matters in life, and a 10-year-old boy who already understood those lessons better than I did. This is insane, Peter said, his frustration boiling over. You're throwing away everything we've built for what? Some sentimental crisis? You're a businessman, Victor. Act like one. Victor was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle but final. I've been acting like a businessman my entire adult life, Peter. It made me rich and miserable. Today I'm trying something different. I'm trying to be a decent human being. If you can't understand that, then perhaps you're not the right person to be my COO. Peter's face flushed red. Are you threatening my job because I'm trying to save a $3 billion deal? I'm questioning whether someone who thinks deals are more important than people should be in a leadership position in my company, Victor clarified. The two men stared at each other, a battle of wills that felt like it might determine more than just one executive's future. Finally, Peter shook his head in disgust. Fine. Ruin the company if you want. But when the board starts asking questions about your fitness to lead, don't expect me to defend this moment of weakness. He turned and strode toward the exit, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope the kid's sister makes it. But hoping doesn't close deals, Victor. Money does. And you're forgetting that. After Peter left, the waiting room felt quieter somehow. Daniel's mother stirred slightly but didn't wake. Victor sat back down, suddenly looking exhausted. I just threatened to fire my COO while sitting in a hospital waiting room. That's probably not good leadership. He was being mean about Maya, Daniel said simply. You were protecting her. I was protecting the decision I made to be here, Victor corrected. $3 billion. I just risked $3 billion to sit in an uncomfortable chair and wait for news about a little girl I met hours ago. Do you regret it? Daniel asked. Victor thought about the question seriously before answering. No, and that might be the most surprising thing of all. A year ago, even this morning, I would have said that protecting a $3 billion deal was the only rational choice. But sitting here, reading my father's letters, watching you and your mother hold on to hope with everything you have, I realize that I've spent decades making rational choices that made me into someone I don't like very much. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Not Dr. Reeves, just a regular nurse with a neutral expression. Daniel's heart jumped into his throat. His mother woke instantly, some maternal instinct alerting her to the presence of news. Hayes family? The nurse asked. They stood together, Daniel, his mother, and Victor, who'd somehow been included in that designation without anyone questioning it. Dr. Reeves wanted me to give you an update, the nurse said. The surgery is progressing well. They've repaired the first valve and are moving on to the second. Everything is going according to plan. It'll be several more hours, but the doctor is optimistic. The relief was so intense, it was almost painful. Daniel's mother made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Daniel felt his knees weaken, and Victor's hand on his shoulder steadied him. She's going to be okay? Daniel asked. Dr. Reeves is very good at what he does, the nurse said with a kind smile. He wouldn't have sent me out here with positive news if he wasn't confident. After she left, Daniel's mother pulled him into a fierce hug, and for the first time since this morning, Daniel let himself actually feel everything he'd been holding back. The fear, the hope, the impossible weight of responsibility. Tears came, and his mother held him, whispering, It's It's okay, baby. I've got you. When Daniel finally pulled away, he found Victor looking at them with an expression of such profound longing it was almost painful to witness. I haven't hugged my daughter in 5 years, Victor said quietly. After the divorce, after I chose work over family too many times, she stopped wanting my affection. I thought she was being dramatic. Now I realize she was just protecting herself from someone who kept proving he didn't value her. It's not too late, Daniel said, wiping his eyes. Maya was dying this morning. Now she's got a 70% chance. Impossible things are possible. You just have to try. Victor pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then, with the look of someone jumping off a cliff, he opened his contacts and made a call. Rachel, it's Dad. I know you don't want to talk to me. I know I don't deserve your time. But I need to tell you something. I need to tell you that you were right about me. And I'm sorry. And I'm trying to change. And I'd really like to buy you coffee tomorrow if you'll let me. Daniel couldn't hear the response, but he saw Victor's face transform as he listened. Tomorrow at 10, Victor said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for giving me another chance. He ended the call and looked at Daniel with tears running down his face. Real tears. The kind that couldn't be controlled or hidden. Impossible things are possible, Victor repeated. You just have to try. Outside the waiting room windows, the city glowed with millions of lights. And in one small waiting room, 3 people sat together in the strange space between fear and hope, learning that sometimes the most important things can't be measured in dollars, but in the courage to choose love over profit, connection over isolation, and hope over certainty. Maya's surgery continued, and they waited together, no longer strangers, but something closer to family. The first light of dawn was breaking over Chicago when Dr. Reeves finally emerged from the surgical wing. He'd removed his surgical cap, and his face showed the exhaustion of 8 hours spent fighting to save a life. But he was smiling. Daniel was on his feet before the doctor had taken 3 steps into the waiting room. His mother grabbed his hand, squeezing so tight it hurt. Victor stood beside them, and Daniel noticed the billionaire's hands were shaking. She made it, Dr. Reeves said simply, and those 3 words rewrote their entire world. The surgery was successful. Maya's heart is functioning beautifully. She's in recovery now, still sedated, but all her vitals are strong. She's going to live. Daniel's mother collapsed into her chair, sobbing with a relief so profound it sounded like pain. Daniel couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process that the impossible thing had actually happened. Maya was alive. His sister was going to live. Victor pulled Daniel into a hug, unexpected, fierce, paternal, and Daniel felt the older man's tears falling into his hair. You did it, Victor whispered. You saved her. We saved her, Daniel corrected, his voice muffled against Victor's shoulder. Dr. Reeves waited patiently for them to collect themselves before continuing. Maya will need to stay in the hospital for several weeks while she recovers. Then she'll need physical therapy and regular checkups. But with proper care, she should live a completely normal life. She can run, play, go to school, everything a child should be able to do. When can we see her? Daniel's mother asked, wiping her eyes. Give us another hour to move her to the pediatric ICU and get her settled. Then you can visit briefly. After Dr. Reeves left, the 3 of them sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what had happened. Less than 24 hours ago, Maya had been dying. Now she had a future. I need to tell you something, Victor said, breaking the silence. About the money. Daniel's heart sank. Here it came. The catch, the strings attached, the revelation that nothing was ever truly free. But Victor's next word surprised him completely. The money is yours, as promised, but I want to propose something additional. I want to create a foundation in your family's name, the Hayes Family Foundation. Its mission will be to help other families facing medical crises they can't afford. He pulled out a tablet from his briefcase, showing them documents he'd apparently been preparing during the long night. I'm proposing to match your $100 million with another $100 million of my own. $200 million dedicated to covering medical costs for children whose families can't afford treatment. You and your mother would be on the board, making decisions about who receives help. Daniel's mother stared at the screen, tears streaming down her face again. Why would you do this? Because yesterday morning, I was a man who measured success by how much wealth I could accumulate, Victor said. Your son showed me that real success is measured by how much suffering you can prevent. I spent 43 years building an empire of money. I'd like to spend whatever years I have left building something that actually matters. A soft knock interrupted them. A young woman in her 20s stood in the doorway, her expression uncertain. She had Victor's eyes, Daniel noticed immediately. Rachel, Victor said, standing quickly. You came. You said it was important, Rachel replied, her voice guarded. You said you were at a hospital. I thought maybe… She trailed off, looking at Daniel and his mother with confusion. These are my friends, Victor said, and the words sounded strange coming from him. Daniel Hayes and his mother. Daniel's sister just came out of surgery. Successful surgery. Rachel's expression softened slightly. I'm glad she's okay. She turned back to her father. Dad, what's going on? You don't do hospitals. You don't skip board meetings. What happened? Victor gestured to the chair beside him. Sit down. I have a story to tell you. For the next 30 minutes, Victor told his daughter everything. About the safe, the letters from his grandfather, Daniel's courage, Maya's surgery, and the decision to value people over profits. Rachel listened with an expression that cycled through disbelief, skepticism, and finally, cautious hope. So you're saying you've had some kind of epiphany? Rachel said slowly when he finished. That you're suddenly going to be a different person? I'm saying I'm going to try, Victor replied. I know I've let you down countless times. I know saying sorry doesn't erase years of choosing work over you. But Daniel taught me something last night. He taught me that impossible things become possible when you absolutely have to make them happen. And what impossible thing are you trying to make happen? Rachel asked. I'm trying to become the father you deserved all along, Victor said simply. I know I can't change the past, but maybe, if you'll let me, I can be better in whatever future we have left. Rachel was quiet for a long moment, studying her father's face. Then she reached out and took his hand, tentatively, carefully. Coffee once a week, she said. No phones, no work talk, just us. If you miss even one, we're done. Understood? Understood, Victor said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Rachel. Daniel watched this reconciliation with a lump in his throat. Yesterday, Victor Thornton had been a cruel stranger who'd mocked him. Today, he was a changed man, fighting to repair relationships he'd broken. A nurse appeared. Hayes family? Maya is settled in her room now. You can see her. They all moved as one. Daniel, his mother, Victor, and Rachel. Maya's room was filled with monitors and equipment, but at the center of it all was his sister, small and pale but breathing steadily, her chest rising and falling with the regular rhythm of a heart that finally worked properly. Daniel's mother went to Maya's bedside, taking her daughter's hand and pressing it to her lips. My baby, she whispered. My sweet, brave baby. Daniel stood on the other side of the bed, marveling at how peaceful Maya looked. No more struggle for breath, no more exhaustion, no more fear. She's going to wake up to a completely different life, Victor said quietly from the doorway. No more pain, no more hospitals. She'll get to be a normal kid. She'll get to grow up, Daniel said, and the simple beauty of those words made him cry again. Hours passed. Maya woke briefly, groggy and confused, but she smiled when she saw Daniel and whispered, You fixed it, Danny. You fixed everything. Then she fell back asleep, and Daniel knew that when she woke again, the nightmare would finally be over. As morning turned to afternoon, Rachel convinced Victor to go get food, to shower, to take a break. Before leaving, Victor approached Daniel one final time. Tomorrow we'll handle the legal paperwork for the money and the foundation, Victor said. But today, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for saving my life too. I didn't save your life, Daniel protested. Yes, you did, Victor insisted. I was dead inside, Daniel. You reminded me what it means to be human. After Victor and Rachel left, Daniel sat with his mother in Maya's room, watching his sister sleep, watching the monitors confirm that her heart was strong and steady. What are we going to do with $100 million? His mother asked, half laughing, half crying. Help people, Daniel said simply. The way Victor helped us. The way Grandpa would have wanted. His mother pulled him close. Your grandfather would be so proud of you. Not because you opened an impossible safe, but because you stayed brave when everything seemed hopeless. Daniel thought about his grandfather's words. Trust your hands, Danny. Trust what I taught you. His grandfather had taught him about locks and mechanisms and patience, but he'd also taught him something more important, that every person has gifts, and the purpose of those gifts isn't to elevate yourself above others, but to lift others up when they're falling. I love you, Mama, Daniel said quietly. I love you too, baby, and I'm so proud of who you are. Daniel stood in the Thornton Tower once more, but this time he walked through the front doors wearing new shoes and clean clothes, no longer invisible or dismissed. The same receptionist who'd looked at him with disdain now smiled warmly and called him by name. Victor's office had changed. The cold marble had been replaced with warmer materials. Photos of Rachel now occupied the spaces where expensive art had hung. And on Victor's desk, in a place of honor, was a photo from the hospital. Daniel and his mother keeping vigil over Maya. The foundation is official, Victor announced, showing Daniel the documents. The Hayes Family Foundation. We've already received applications from 37 families in immediate need. The board meets next week to decide who we help first. All of them, Daniel said immediately. If we can help all of them, we should. Victor smiled. That's exactly what your mother said. You two are going to revolutionize how I think about money. Good, Daniel replied. Because money doesn't mean anything if you don't use it to make things better. At that moment, Rachel entered with Maya, who was still weak but recovering beautifully. The 8-year-old's face lit up when she saw the view from Victor's office. Danny, you can see the whole city, Maya exclaimed. It's so beautiful. It is, Daniel agreed, looking not at the city but at his sister. Alive, happy, healing. It really is. Victor watched them with profound gratitude. I've looked at this view for 20 years and I never once saw it as beautiful. I saw it as proof of my success, my power. But watching Maya see it for the first time, now I finally understand what beauty actually looks like. Rachel put her arm around her father's shoulders. You're getting better at this humanity thing. I have good teachers, Victor replied, looking at Daniel. As they stood together in that office high above Chicago, Daniel realized that the impossible thing he'd done wasn't just opening a safe or saving his sister's life. The impossible thing was showing a man who'd lost his way that it was never too late to change, never too late to choose love over money, connection over isolation, meaning over success. The safe had contained letters from a father to his son. But it had also contained something more valuable. It had contained the truth that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch, the hearts you heal, and the courage you show when everything seems hopeless. Daniel's grandfather had been right. Every lock has a heartbeat. You just have to learn to feel it. And sometimes, opening one lock opens 1,000 others. Doors to second chances, to redemption, to becoming the person you were always meant to be. The impossible had become possible. And it all started with a barefoot boy who refused to give up, and a billionaire who finally learned what really mattered.